So what implications does kind of what you've been talking about in terms of differing valuations for a business, what implications does that have on buyers?
So from the buyer's seat, if you're chasing a business and you can't get to a valuation that's going to win the day, that's always an easy conclusion because you've put all your cards on the table and you don't win. The real hard part for a buyer is when you get the call that says you've put in the bid and you've won. You always wonder, did you overpay? Why did I win? How come the other guy who I was suspicious of didn't win this? If you have a shot at winning, there's always a tension. You want to pay as little as possible for the business. You typically want to be fair, but you don't want to overpay, and you want to win. So I think that as you are being aggressive as a buyer for a business, to the extent you need to be, you may have to share some of the upside opportunity if you're a strategic as it relates to synergies in order to win a deal. You know, there may be the math, there may be what you think is a fair value, and as a buyer, you may say, if we're going to create synergies beyond the value of the standalone business, that those are synergies that, whether they're cross-selling or cost-saving synergies, we're going to create once we're combined. That's my work, that's my value. I don't want to pay you as a seller for it. That being said, to the extent it's competitive and you're not going to win, strategic buyers will start to dip into that, and that gives them the ability to potentially pay a bit more than they otherwise would for a standalone business. The other thing that strategic buyers really often consider is it a defensive play? Do we stretch because we don't want a competitor to get this business? That's where you can set up a valuation and say, here's where I think fair value is for business X. But if somebody else is willing to pay more, you have that fundamental decision to make. And at a certain price, it's not worth you buying. And it's always a challenge for each respective buyer to get to that point of indifference and understand if they're willing to stretch any farther or if they're willing to take the risk that the deal goes away from them.
So it's a lot to think about. So kind of shifting back to the sellers, so even though that end price that you've been talking about is important to most sellers, there are certainly other factors that go beyond price for a selling company. Can you discuss what else affects a seller's decision on whose bid they accept?
Yeah, these are huge factors for a client, and these are things that we like to discuss on the front end of a process with our clients. They can be very, very meaningful. The easiest metric to judge is price, because they're simply numbers and you can put numbers up against each other. There are many other facets that go into selection of a buyer. The transaction-related items I mentioned before, the purchase agreement items, and management of your liabilities going forward. Two people at the same number may have different markups to a purchase agreement and have completely different risk profiles for the seller. So from a transaction perspective, those are important things. But on the front end, there are a lot of things sellers should think about and do think about and oftentimes give us direction on. As I mentioned, price is very easy, but there are family issues, succession issues, tradition issues. Maybe you want to make sure that that company name survives. You want to make sure that the employees that you have at your company are not going to be rationalized, and you'd be fearful that if you went to a competitor, they may have synergies that would allow them to pay more. But those synergies would be loss of employees or loss of community commitment, what have you. Are you looking for a strategic buyer or are you looking for a financial buyer? Oftentimes we have sellers that want one or the other. Oftentimes we have sellers that want to explore both avenues and learn more. As I mentioned before, a financial buyer may give you a second bite at the apple. They'll come in and help you grow the business. They'll want a commitment from you, let you leave some equity in the business, roll that over with the objective of growing the business and making a smaller percentage of equity become a larger dollar bite later once you've collectively grown the business if everything goes to plan. As it relates to strategics, are there alignments? Do you see advantages? Does it create a combination that lets you deliver more for your customers? Is that what you're looking for in a transaction? Are you simply looking to sell a business and walk away? Do you want to go play golf all day? Do you want to go sit on a beach somewhere? Do you want to travel the world and not think about business anymore? Those dynamics have a huge impact on how you should look at buyers and what type of process you should run, because they ultimately impact the type of bids that you're going to get. And you need to make sure that if you're going to run through a process, if you're going to sell your business, that you're targeting the right folks to get the right result, and you need to tailor your approach to those buyers appropriately.
Finally, Reed, even if a distributor is not planning to sell their business tomorrow, why does everything we just discussed matter? I mean, what can companies take away from your perspective on this topic of business valuation to improve their businesses?
You know, Lindsay, that's a great question, one that candidly, as an advisor, we struggle with in discussions with businesses that are not looking to sell today. Selling your business is a large decision. It's not one that should be made when you're looking to sell the business. The last thing you want to do is decide one day that I want to sell the business and I want to move on and walk away from the business. Let me start the process of selling the business. You are not going to maximize value or certainty in that scenario. You want to be thoughtful. You want to prepare your business. You want to understand what the expectations and requirements are going to be. You want to understand how a buyer is going to view certain aspects of your business. If you decide that you want to sell your business today and you start reaching out to people and they come in and find things with the business that could be a concern to a buyer, at that point, you're already at the end of your clock, and there's really no opportunity to make any changes to accommodate any of those things or improve them. When you spend time, a year or several years in advance of wanting to sell your business, talking about it, understanding what needs to be done, getting a perspective on how buyers will look at things, that will improve the attractiveness of your business, that will improve the price that you get for your business, and that will improve the likelihood that you get a deal done. Just because somebody wants to sell a business at a certain price doesn't mean that they're going to be able to. And certainty is absolutely critical. So doing those things, succession planning, making sure a buyer is going to be comfortable with customer concentration or key man risk, all of those things are things that you can talk about with somebody in advance, well in advance, to plan for those things, much like you plan for your business on a day-to-day basis. That, we find, is very valuable. And oftentimes, I'll have a relationship with a company for 5 or more years before they even want to think about selling, and they'll bounce ideas off of us. Maybe they're looking at an acquisition. Is this helpful to us, or does this become a distraction? How would a buyer view it? We'll give them feedback, and then they can make an educated decision so that they're not doing something that may be detrimental to the opportunity to sell their business and get a deal done, or detrimental to value at the end of the day. I think an evaluation makes a business stronger. Getting perspectives from people and thinking about your business in a critical way is really a benefit, not only to when you want to sell your business, but a benefit to how you want to operate your business and the strategic planning that you do on a regular basis.
Excellent. Well, you've provided a lot for our listeners to think about today, Reed, so thank you for sharing your experiences.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lindsay. I enjoyed the discussion.
For those of our listeners who want to learn more about Houlihan Lokey, visit hl.com. That's pretty simple to remember. You can also read Reed's article that we referenced today at mdm.com/valuations. Thanks again for joining us.